morning and welcome to the continuing session on motivation. In the last chapter, we discussed about the definition of motivation and the content theories of motivation, the reinforcement theories of motivation. In this session, we will continue mainly with the goal setting theory and the process theories of motivation. When you are talking of the goal setting theory, so here we are discussing on like how motivation takes place. Goal setting theory focuses on the impact of performance goals on task performance. The central proposition of this theory is that the performance goals that people hold for a particular task are likely to determine how well that they perform that task, and differences in the content of the performance goals relate to the differences in task performance. So, if the goal is highly defined in nature, if the performance goal is attractive in nature, then what happens? The people are more motivated to reach that goal. So, if you just tell someone like you have to give your best, which is not a very well defined goal, the performance which comes out of that is bit lower than if a target is set as a performance goal, like you have to give this much of yourself or you have to achieve this target sort of thing. So, a well defined attractive performance goal will be related more to the motivation of what effort that person will take, particular person will take in reaching that performance goal. As a result, we can see that specific and difficult goals leads to higher performance as they clearly define acceptable levels of performance, increase the amount of effort exerted, increase task persistence, lead to more extensive strategy development and planning, orient individuals towards goal related knowledge and activities. So, what happens if a very specific and difficult goals are set? So, it will be more challenging to the individual to reach that goal. Because there is a challenge, it will be more motivating for that person. The acceptable, because the acceptable level of performance as it is clearly defined, what that person will try to do is to take more effort in reaching that difficult goal, and will try to persist in the number of times. It will be persistence in the sort of like the considerable period of time for which that person will try to reach the goal. So, both these things will lead to and they will go for extensive strategy development, like what are the processes that will help the person to reach a particular goal, and we will try to know more about the goal set for the person if the goal set is somewhat difficult in nature. Next, what happens? It will lead to more strategy planning and goal relevant activities. Next important thing is the feedback, which importance of feedback. The feedback leads to higher performance than non-feedback. So, feedback, and of course relevant and timely feedback are very important in leading to higher performance of the individual to reach a particular goal. In addition to feedback, another thing which is very important for goal setting behavior is of course the goal commitment. That is how much the individual who is trying to reach a particular goal is committed to it, wants to reach it, has a positive attraction for that goal. That is very important because that will define the efforts taken by the person and the persistence of that person in the process of achieving that goal. The number of times you will go on trying in spite of he may face failure sometimes, that will the goal commitment is going to define that. Next is of course adequate self-efficacy. Self-efficacy denotes the person's own idea and belief that he or she is able to perform certain tasks. Persons with who are high in self-efficacy will respond to negative feedback with increased effort and motivation, whereas those low in self-efficacy they are likely to lessen their effort when given negative feedback. Because a person with high self-efficacy knows like how far good or bad he is in a particular task, and he is confident on himself like he can do certain task. Now, even when receiving negative feedback from the environment, what that person does is he wants to learn from that negative feedback and try to take corrective measures, corrections required in the process of doing certain things, and moves in that way, like adapting to the learning from the feedback given and accommodating that in the process of doing certain things. But people who have negative or a lowered self-efficacy, low in level, they are not very sure about their own capacity of doing certain things, and negative feedback they feel like, okay, environment is also telling me that I can't do certain things, and as a result, because they themselves are not very sure about their ability, and also the environment is giving the feedback about their negative performance or like where corrective actions need to be taken, what they may do is lower the performance and show a lesser degree of motivation. So, in that cases what happens, they lessen their effort in the way of like trying for reaching the goal. Third, which is more important in your in the process of goal setting is of course, like in addition to feedback we discussed about goal commitment and self-efficacy. Third important thing is the task relevant ability, and fourth is the task complexity. So, if the person who is to reach the goal has a task relevant ability, then it is more expected that the person can reach the goal in a better way than a person who does not have the task relevant ability. And task complexity, like if the task is complex enough in nature, it will give a intrinsic motivation to the person for like trying to solve that goal, because it is more challenging to the individual in solving a complex task rather than achieving and for a less complex task. So, these are the factors which, in addition to feedback, can affect the goal setting behavior. But another important thing which was not mentioned as a part of this theory is, of course, if you can understand the role of personality pattern and intelligence on these goal setting behaviors that we saw, like self efficacy or interpreting the task complexity, or like having a task relevant ability. All these things depend on the level of intelligence and the personality pattern of the individual also. Now, we can now discuss about self set goals. Now, goals, as we have discussed earlier, can be set by the individuals themselves for their some activities, or it can be chosen by the organization for the individual based on the roles that the employee has joined in the organization. When we are talking of self set goals, it depends on various factors, like, of course, like first important is past performance level. If a particular person has performed well earlier in a certain goal, in reaching a certain goal, then maybe he will go for more choosing for a more difficult goal next time. If that person becomes confident enough, like he can reach a very difficult goal. So, the past performance levels will determine the goal choice next time. Next, it will depend, of course, on the ability of the person, self efficacy of the person, as we discussed just now, and of course, goal orientation, like how much oriented you are towards that goal, what you know about that goal, these things. Then conscientiousness, like how far he is believed to be dependent in nature, like who can take responsibility sort of nature by the organization or the setup in which you set the self set goals. Next is the high need for achievement and need for achievement of the person who set the self set goals. Then next is instrumentality of that particular goal in getting maybe recognition, rewards, etc. in the organization, like how far it leads to, like if I reach this goal, it will be helpful in getting me recognition or a change job position in the organization. And of course, number 8 is the mood of the individual at that particular point of time, which gets attached to the like self set goals, like what is the mood at this point of time. Then based on that, it gets this self set goals leads to positive or negative feeling. Next is, like when we are talking of control theory, then the goal setting theory, as we discussed earlier, it has some criticisms, like what goals do you set, how do you reach that goal, how important is that goal for you, how long do you persist for a particular goal. These factors depend on like environmental factors. So, whether a goal is important or not, how far a person can persist or not, this depends on environmental and also some degree of personal factors like emotional intelligence, then your personality and all these things. So, based on that, and these provide a control to the person exerting certain influence on the effort in trying for a particular goal. So, that is called the control theory, and it is divided into two parts like cybernetic control theory and rational control theory. And both focus on how individuals gather and evaluate environmental feedback to regulate their behavior. So, in cybernetic control theory, what happens? The output passes through a sensor, environmental sensor, and the comparison is made between current behavior and behavioral referent, that is gold standard. If there is no discrepancy, the behavior is maintained. In case of discrepancy, then there is a self correction motivational tendency which motivated the person to take a cognitive or behavioral measure to reduce the discrepancy, and the result is a change output which again passes through the loop. So, what happens is like when there is a comparison made like between the standard, how a good performer would have performed, that standard with along with the current behavior and performance, then what happens, you may lead to certain discrepancy like the how what is the standard set and what is that you get as a part of the current behavior. When there is a gap between the how the standard is working and how the present behavior is happening, this is called a discrepancy, or this gap is called a discrepancy. Then what happens, if there is a discrepancy, then we try to take certain motivational techniques and try to reduce that discrepancy. So, what happens whenever there is a discrepancy, what results in is self correcting motivational tendency, and it may lead to like cognitive and behavioral measures to reduce the discrepancy, and when that is done, it is leading to a better output. When there is no discrepancy, then what happens, the old behavior is maintained. Here the old behavior is changed, but when there is no discrepancy, the old behavior is maintained, and it will lead to output, and it will lead to like passing through the environmental sensor, and this circle is going to continue. Now, what happens over here, like we have talked of discrepancy and a self correcting motivational tendency, like whenever there is a discrepancy, there is a self correcting motivational tendency. What we have to think over here is that this self-correcting motivational tendency does not occur automatically after the discrepancy is noted. So, what is more important over here is the rational control theory. So, which tells a goal behavior discrepancy does not automatically trigger a self-correcting process. Individuals are tolerant of small group behavior discrepancies. So, if it's small goal behavior discrepancies, this is like if the discrepancy is small between the set goals and what is set standard and what you can currently achieve. So, if there is a small goal behavior discrepancy, the individuals are tolerant of it, but when the discrepancy is large enough, now the individuals are not tolerant of it. Next is like when does a discrepancy trigger an action? So, in order for a discrepancy to be realized as a discrepancy between a goal and the behavior, what happens, like it should have an attention, like attention should be given to it. So that you can tell, like due attention to be given to it, so that if people can know like this is a real discrepancy which you are more concerned about, and it can trigger a reaction. Next is then goal must be important factors likely to influence the choice of cognitive and behavioral mechanism for discrepancy reduction. So, goal must be very important, goals must be very important to the individual. So that you can find, like if that goal is very important, we can use like the different, we can try to think about the different choices of cognitive and behavioral mechanism for discrepancy reduction. Next important point is of course to trigger this rational control theory is the magnitude of discrepancy. How much is the discrepancy? Now, next consideration is what is the expectation in future of success if I reduce this discrepancy now. And also another important factor in trying to reduce the discrepancy is the past failure faced in reducing the discrepancy. Then you can make a balance between, like, okay, these many times I succeeded and these many times I failed while designing the discrepancy reduction, while thinking of discrepancy reduction measures for reducing this discrepancy. Tend to use cognitive strategies when discrepancy is large, expectancy or failure is high, and the recent failures are present. So, you use cognitive strategies like deciphering why was this discrepancy, what occurred, what went wrong, sort of thinking on the discrepancy when it is large, when the expectancy of failure, like you may know like he will fail, but still you are trying to make some, to know some important strategies for discrepancy reduction, and then when there is a recent knowledge of failures present. So, all these things will help you to reduce this discrepancy by the use of the thinking domain and the thought processes, and instead of acting on it from the very feeling aspect, we are working on it from the cognitive aspect. Now, social cognitive theory, cognition is like when we use our thoughts, beliefs, memories, etc. to know certain things, and social cognitive theory was given by Bandura in 1986. So, in it, like self regulation of behavior is very important, which has been mentioned. Self regulation entails 4 interrelated processes like goal establishment, self observation, self evaluation, and self reaction. Now, goal establishment, as if already discussed, like it is a function of past behavior, then it is a result of past behavior, and which is maybe arranged in hierarchies, like very recent to very past, like proximal to distal. Then whether it is a source of self satisfaction for the individuals, whether they have a sense of personal mastery of it, like whether they have sustained their interest in it, all these self efficacy, all these will like lead to increase in feelings of self efficacy and lead to interesting tasks when utilized as a means of facilitating the distal goals. So, you see, like when you establish a particular goal, what happens, the individual's own backgrounds, personalities, sense of mastery in certain things, sense of self efficacy, all these play a major part in whether you will facilitate a goal or not. Goal behavior discrepancy is like while there is a discrepancy in the set goals and the behavioral outcome. So, when that happens, what is there is like these discrepancy could be both negative and positive in nature. So, negative discrepancy is why is that you cannot reach your goal, sort of, then what happens, it reduces the sense of self efficacy and satisfaction. So, and you try to take more efforts to reach that goal, and you may reduce or redefine that goal also at a very somewhat lower standard, so that it can be reached. that is negative goal behavior. When we are talking of positive discrepancies, then what happens, like your behavior is what you have like achieved more than what the goal demands from you. So, positive discrepancy leads to upward goal revision and increases the self efficacy, and it impacts like performance and increases strategy for development and planning, because then what happens, you try to improve your goal, you have a self efficacy like, yeah, I can reach this particular goal, and something extra also which encourages like the upward goal revision. So, in a nutshell, what happens is that when a challenging goal is set, then goal behavior discrepancy is created, and what we do is we work towards reducing this discrepancy, whether it is a negative discrepancy or it is a positive discrepancy, and following the discrepancy reduction, new challenges are set for the individuals. So, in that way this performance, this motivation goes up. Some of the discrepancy reduction strategies are of course increase effort for doing certain things. Change the task strategy means how you decided to reach that goal. Third is lower the goal. So, if that goal is lowered, then it will be easy for that person to reach that particular goal. Abandon a particular activity if the discrepancy is large. Next is like the contribution of ability level and the self efficacy in setting higher standards and discrepancy production process. What happens if you have higher self efficacy and you know, like you are able to do certain things, then you may introduce discrepancies to certain extent in the goal setting process, which becomes motivating from the for the part of the individual, while that it is tried to reduce that discrepancy. And perceived importance of the goal is of course why do you try all these things, why you will try to reduce that discrepancy, or why try to persist. It will depend only when the importance of the goal is very much, you have a due importance, considerable importance for the goal that is set for you. So, responses, like how again responses to the discrepancies after the perception of discrepancies there may vary from person to person, and this may depend on like dispositional factors and affective factors, cognitive factors and contextual factors present around. So, it is not that like even if a discrepancy is observed in a goal and your behavior, like what you can do and what you cannot do. So, it is not that like every person will react to that discrepancy in similar way, but it depends on the individual factors, in individual background factors as mentioned here. So, again if we can recall back, individual differences plays a very major part in how you react to your goal and how do you behave to it. So, if you can just say like the manager sets difficult specific goal for a job or a task, and like this is the application of goal setting theory and your like control theories and all together. Like if the manager sets a difficult specific difficult goal for a job, then what happens? Then if the individual has confidence that that the given level of performance can be attained, then what happens? Individual sets higher targets, goals for their performance, and as a result they have better task performance, because setting higher goals and trying to reach that goal is itself being very motivating for these employees. So, this is how goal setting theory along with some aspects of control theory are all used together while you are talking of motivating individuals in the organization. Coming to the next group of theory, which is the equity theory, in which this is a very unique theory in which the individual tries to make comparison about their job inputs and outputs, and with relevance to others present in the organization. Now, what happens? Like they try to see how others respond to this particular type of situation, and then may try to manipulate that performance to reach a very equitable level. So, if you can just see equity theory, in equity theory individuals make comparisons of their job inputs and outcomes relative to those of others, and then respond to it so as to eliminate any inequities. And inequity arises like when an employee perceives like he is either under rewarded or over rewarded. Both the situations are not good sort of thing. So, what happens then if that perceived inequity is there, then the employees can go through 6 choices, that is change their inputs, change their outcomes, distort the perception of self, distort perception of others, choose a different referent, and leave the field. So, that is the extreme thing while you are leaving the field. So, what happens if you can see if I as a person feel like I give more input than others, and but still we are receiving the same type of benefit from the organization, what I may try to do is change my input and slow down, and also in that case change of outcomes. So, either you increase the input or decrease the output, whatever it is, you want to map it with the others present in the organization, and then you try to monitor your input and output and perception of self and perception of others in similar way to just maintain that equity. Now, one important point over here which is of consideration, of course, who are these others? Others could be people present within the organization, or others are people who are in the doing same task, same type of job, but they are outside the organization in the larger society. So, others, whether they are inside others, whether they are outside others, will determine the comparison made and what can be done according to it. Like when people are less informed or do not have too many of people to ask questions about, they to know about the details of the job, what they try to do is they compare their inequity with that present others around the job, means in the same organization, what others are doing, maybe what profit the owner of the factory is getting and how much it is given as the bonus to the employees. So, all these sort of things. But when the job is such, like you come into contact with many people, your area spreads in that way, and what you can do is you compare yourself to the others, and these others are people outside the environment of the organization, and they give their and they give their suggestions regarding like what needs to be done by the organization and how they should try to like bring equity and all these factors. So, when there is a like informed group of people, the top, generally top level people, the comparison for them, these others stands for like outside the organization, friend circle and or other information sources which will make you help a very industry wide comparison. But in other case, these others mean like within the same environment and the organization. So, this establishes 4 propositions like given payment by time, over rewarded employees will produce more than will equitable paid employees. Next is given payment by quantity of production, over rewarded employees will produce fewer but more quality jobs, high quality products than equitable pay employees. Then given payment by time, what under rewarded employees will do, they will produce less or consume like they will produce less, or that is they consume more time per production, and these qualities will be poorer in nature. Given payment by quantity of production, what happens then, under rewarded employees will produce more, but it will be of lesser quality, and they will produce large number of low quality goods, and with comparison with the your equitable paid employees. So, these are the 4 situations based on the under rewarded or over rewarded employees and their effects on their performance in the organization, or performance in the organization, or it determines like how they are perceived by the like outside world, also this organization and the policies that it is having about the individuals inside. And so, what is important is employees are more concerned about the process of distribution of pay for equity, and that brings to the justice aspect, like when this is inequity, these are the 4 things that we discussed, like equity, inequity due to over reward or under reward. So, the process is more important over here, and we are more concerned with the justice aspect. So, organizational justice is a very important term as far as equity theory is concerned, because the equity and all these things, like how the input output ratio is being compared, all this depends on perception, and perception of how far my organization is just, how far it avoid by the like fairness of the outcome or fairness of the process. So, there are three types of justice, which is distributive justice, procedural justice and interactional justice. Distributive justice, when the perceived fairness of outcome, like what is given as a reward, it appears to be free from errors, and it appears to be fair in like setting that outcome. Next is procedural justice, is the process through which you lead to certain things, you distribute certain rewards, and it is thought of being fair enough, like transparency is there in what you are doing. Interactional justice is perceived degree to which one is treated with dignity and respect. So, that is very more like, even if you are arranging like the 3 distributive, procedural and interactional justice, like interaction justice, though it's very like it's listed 3rd, but it's maybe the most important thing in the whole justice scenario, because whether you are treated with dignity and respect will denote like how you will the good feeling that you generate about the organization. So, if you can see, distributive justice is perceived fairness of the outcome, like I got the pay raise that I deserved. Procedural justice, perceived fairness of the process used to determine the outcome. I had input into the process and used to give raises and was given a good explanation of why I received the raise I did. Interaction justice, perceived degree to which one is treated and dignity. So, my supervisor was very nice, was telling me about my raises, and this is where I feel like this is a fair place to work. Expectancy theory is again like when it talks of like the importance of the goal set for the individual, it's the idea, individual's idea, like the effort, like the effort that the individual has taken will lead to the certain behavior, and it's like also it's believed like this performance will lead to certain reward. So these are the expectancies, like which is called Vroom's model, which is called valence, instrumentality and expectancy model, VIE model, where you find the expectancy, instrumentality and valence are the three terms mentioned. Valence is the importance of the goal set for the person, how important it is, and positively valent outcomes are more desirable. Expectancy, that engaging in certain behavior will lead to first level outcome, and instrumentality, that is the first level outcome will reach to a second level outcome. So these were the three combinations that you find, like the valence is a function of like instrumentality of the outcome to reach of outcome J to attainment of outcome K, and the valence anticipated satisfaction. And so it consists of three things, like the attractiveness of the outcome, performance reward linkage, and effort performance linkage. So these are three important points, like but it is sometimes like if we just ask whether how much it's been practiced in the organization, sometimes the people are not sure, like even if they are trying to do certain things, whether that effort is going to yield result, whether they will be able to perform well ultimately based on the constraints that they are there in the organization, or even if they are performing, will they get recognized with a proper reward or not. So there are a bit of question marks regarding this effort performance linkage and performance reward linkage, and based on the organizational practices which prevailing at present. So the issues brought forward by this expectancy theory are like so if we can just know, like design things based on the expectancies and removing the gap between performance, we can link it performance based pay, and we can give the feedback like how the effort can lead to performance and all these things, then it will lead to a proper motivation. Cognitive evaluation theory is linked with that the rewards exert their influence on intrinsic motivation through their ability to satisfy your first rate two needs, that is the need for competency and need for self determination. So if the reward increases this perception of competence and self determination, then intrinsic motivation is also going to increase. But the word of caution over here, like extrinsic rewards sometimes tend to reduce intrinsic motivation. It is found that the originally a task which is intrinsically motivating may get reduced if we introduce an extrinsic motivation to it and extrinsic reward to it, and this is called like this aspect is called self concordance. So factors, if you see that intrinsic motivation are affecting negatively, like threats, deadlines, competition, etc., positively like positive performance feedback, self direction, choice, these affects intrinsic motivation. And meaningfulness of the progress, competence, all these 4 key reward areas to define intrinsic motivation. And we can lead through different methods to like leading for choice and competence. We can take different ways to increase the meaningfulness and progress towards this intrinsic motivation. So, if we make a comparison of the motivational theories, if we find how to make a comparison, you will find like need theory is industrial applicability is very limited. Equity theory is also limited because social comparisons are made, but feelings of inequity can be reduced through means other than increased motivation. So, reinforcement theory is also application is less in organization because contingent payment for performance is possible in some jobs. So, ethical problems may arise. Goal setting theory application is very strong because if people can set their own goals or managers can set goals for the individuals also. And like expectancy theory also it's like people expect certain things, but there are again they are in doubts, and this can be used like a proper application can be made to design rewards based on their expectancies. And like if you find implications, so reinforcement theories will predict quality and quantity of work. Absenteeism content theories will address like if needs are assumed to be common, design jobs to satisfy basic needs. Task theories will define task characteristics, address dependent variables like task identity, significance, and process theories will tell about how to set difficult goals and to increase higher productivity. Equity theory will tell about how to bring equity in the behavior and predict absence and turnover. Expectancy, it tells about employee productivity, absenteeism, and what can be done to reduce these factors like so these are and we can tell a combination of all these things may lead to like you cannot tell in organization that I am going to now look into just into the motivational need theories or reinforcement theories or content theories or process theories, but as a practitioner you have to take all these things into combination while you are trying to motivate your employees in the organization, because it is what, how, why sort of things, and how to, what is the process to be taken in order to motivate the person, and like so that there is a clear direction set and they take effort, people take effort, and there is they persist and towards a certain goal, and ultimately they give a very positive behavior outcome to the organization. So, questions based over here, it is like why it is important for a manager to consider the various components of motivation when diagnosing motivation problems, which of the content approach or the process approach is best, which explains motivation. What implication does Herzberg two-factor theory have for the design of organizational reward system? How can the theory be used to explain differences in the 3 components of motivation? What would be it like to manage an organization where all employees are self-actualized? What kind of opportunities and problems would the situation present to the management? How important a role does perception play in determining whether an employee is receiving equitable treatment? What kinds of things might a manager do to influence those perceptions? Goal setting can be a difficult system to implement effectively. what kind of problems might be encountered in an effort to implement a goal setting program in an organization. As a manager, what would you do to minimize the likelihood you would encounter in these problems? So, thank you, and I hope that the answers to these questions, which are more implication oriented, will help you to understand the application of the motivational theories as a whole, and along with the other previous chapters that you have learned, how they also influence the motivation of the employees in the organization, and what managers can do to motivate the employees in a better way. Thank you.